The Last Silver Bullet, written by GAMI, narrated by Akshay Ghildhiyal. Original music and sound design by Chintan Kalra. The plant kingdom was seeing a deadly conspiracy unfold after the creation of man. Slowly but surely, the humans have been turned into puppets by a secret army to make them bring on climate change. They are being used for an invasion of Earth, with global warming meant to be the highly classified mission statement of this peculiarly powerful army. The clock is ticking for a mass extinction like never before. Time has come to fire the last shot. Time has come to save the tree of life. But growing in the heart of California's iconic Yosemite National Park, Buddy and an odd bunch of young plants are hunting for the sacred weapon to defeat the invaders. Little do they know that they won't be able to pull it off unless they faced up to none other but themselves. Chapter 1. Misstakeholders. What do you do when you realize you are heading in a direction you think is the wrong one? Do you backpedal and start the journey again, or do you keep continuing on the same path? While the former is an option a lot of people end up choosing, the latter makes sense too. Why take a U-turn when the world is round? Was the logic behind it. For Buddy Smalls, it would have been pretty easy to back out of the things he was getting into, but for a change, he went with the flow and life ended up coming full circle. "Oh, come on, sweetheart, it's gonna be a nice school trip," Gia, Buddy's mother, egged him on. All young flower-producing plants and trees looked forward to school trips, but not Buddy. It was the bullies he hated dealing with. School trips invariably got them going on overdrive. Though they'd never train their guns at him because he generally kept to himself, he just hated the ugliness. The funny thing about entering high school was that you started to notice everything. A school was more than a place to learn new stuff and develop social interaction skills. A school was a bully farm too. When you are younger and tinier, you get bullied. But the moment you enter high school, you are in a position to be the bully. Sadly, a lot of kids start cherishing that change of position and conveniently become the tormentors. Well, it is either the school trip or you're coming with us to the protest. Joseph, Buddy's father, laid it out. Buddy would get so disinterested in things sometimes that Gia and Joseph would have to give him an option they knew he'd hate even more. He couldn't see himself as someone going to environmental protests and seminars, even though he generally cared about the issues. Unlike Buddy, his little sister Millyanne was vociferously critical of environment-unfriendly activities, even getting nicknamed Militia for that. Though she was still to make it out of middle school, Millyanne was notorious for having issues with almost everything. She even had issues with human beings obsessed with cut flowers, saying that it was utterly sadistic to cut off the reproductive organs of plants and giving them to each other for expressing love and other emotions. Sometimes she would get so angry that the Smalls family would have to take her on hiking trips, keep her on the move so that she doesn't get enough time at one place to notice the problems, they believed. This was the secret life of flowering plants and trees, the Bloomins. They were roaming the world as simulations. They had their own experiential reality, their second life beyond a rooted state. The Bloomin hyper-reality experience of the 21st century allowed users to assume a human-like body with roots braiding up to form the torso and limbs. Along with sensory features for seeing, smelling, hearing, and tasting stuff, you could also feel the simulation of a real environment with a 4D touch. The prevalent conditions of a place had the same effects on a Blumen in hyperreality as they did if that Blumen was physically present there. You could also have a physical interaction with other users exploring the same area, even brawl with them and exchange impact feedback to the body. It was exciting yet dangerous, since plants and trees could die in these simulations right where they stood. Come now, I'll try not to bug you with my idealism. Milian coaxed Buddy to join the family. He had already decided to come along with them anyway. People might just be nicer at the protest than on the school trip, he thought. The family was going on a hyper-reality protest being held next to a huge rock called the Sentinel Dome. It was a famous spot at the Yosemite Valley of California. Though they lived in the vicinity of the dome, the kids had only seen it from a distance. By the way, what exactly is this protest for? Asked Buddy. We are protesting against a decree issued by the human government of Brazil. It has cancelled a 10-year ban on sugarcane cultivation in the Amazon rainforest, Gia informed. Is sugarcane cultivation in the Amazon a problem? Buddy inquired further. He thought that it was a mere plant replacing plant sort of scenario. Problem? Milian expressed her surprise at how little Buddy knew. It is a huge problem. They'll be cutting down indigenous plants and trees. It will be a disaster for Amazon. But what difference is it going to make with us Blumens protesting? It's not like the humans are ever going to know about it, Buddy asked his family. Gia took it upon herself to clarify. We are protesting so that the sugarcane grass is stopped from taking over the Amazon. Buddy went on with his attempt of convincing the rest. Oh, but such land takeovers by Blumens happen all the time. Humans have been clearing forest land to cultivate their food ever since the time they got into agriculture. Agreed, but this one is different, clarified Gia. The sugarcane grass is already the most cultivated crop in the world, with Brazil already accounting for 40% of its farming. Still, they want to increase its cultivation, that too at the expense of indigenous flora. All this for more sugar and producing a biofuel that doesn't even curb the emission of greenhouse gases. Milian spoke out with extreme disgust as she applied war paint on her face. I still don't get it, Mom, admitted Buddy. Even if we can convince our Blumen government that this is going to be disastrous, it is the humans who can do something about it and not us. That is the whole point of the protest, sweetheart. Our government can stop this. How can our government possibly do anything about it? Buddy pleaded for an explanation. In fact, it is our Blumen government who is encouraging this destruction of the rainforest, revealed Milian. What? Buddy was taken aghast. Well, it is happening because the sugarcane families have an ambition of becoming biofuel tycoons, clarified Gia. Other than generating a lot of revenue for the government, the sugarcanes are also bribing away office holders to sweeten the deal. Milian rolled her eyes at that. All this in the name of development and progress. She put it down with a sigh. Yeah, acknowledged Gia. That's the government's hot take on this. No, Mom, said Milian. It is such a ridiculous logic that this must be called the government's nuclear take on destroying the Amazon. Wow, Buddy was amazed at the audacity of the sugarcanes and the government. But Mom, you still have to tell him how our government can prevent the humans from ruining the Amazon, Milian reminded Jia. Jia happily obliged. If our government wants, it can get the sugarcanes to stop yielding a good crop in the rainforest. That'll make the Brazilian government drop the idea. Ah, I guess that'll work, observed Buddy, since the catch was clear to him now. Milian had a sudden surge of enthusiasm at that. Great! She pumped her fist and cried out, "Let's go get the sugarcanes then." Without wasting more time, the family clicked away on their PCs to reach the protest site. They had already armed themselves with extra pairs of shoes. Chapter 2. Bullies. The scenes at the protest site were pretty electric, with bloomers pouring in from all corners of California. There was a lot of excitement around because they were hopeful that this will bring change. Milian wasn't the only one there sporting war paint. Many of them had body paint jobs of animal species that would go extinct with the destruction of their habitat. A lot of the giant Californian trees were carrying holographic banners too. Save Amazon. Don't create a Shamazon. Amazon words with common sense. Just like the Smalls family, everyone was carrying an extra pair of shoes too. "Why are we all carrying shoes?" inquired Buddy. "This is going to be a peaceful protest, right?" "Of course, sweetheart. We are all carrying shoes so that we can place them here," explained Jia. "The protest organizers will make them emit the smell of fermented soybean." "Doesn't fermented soybean smell like stinking socks?" "Precisely. The protest organizers have arranged for these hyper-real shoes to be kept outside our parliament. More the shoes, more the smell." Milian placed her Treebok trainers at the place designated for them. "Seriously hope this wakes them up," she muttered. Buddy was keeping an eye on the riot police and government officials present there. They were watching everything with cold disdain. The Smalls family was only a family of tiny succulents. They were missing much of the action because of the tall trees around them. "I can't see anything from here, Mom," complained Buddy. "Shall we go on top of the Sentinel Dome then?" suggested Milian. "Super. This way we won't get into any trouble," thought Buddy. The protest site looked a real spectacle from up above, with the crowd swaying in a hypnotic wave at times. A lot of families had come with their kids because it was a famous tourist attraction and a great place to take part in selfie Olympics. There were some who were there just so they can have a good laugh by demeaning the protesters. They were there to derive some entertainment. "Look at all these eco-nuts going bananas down there," a barbarian schoolgirl made her assumption known. "Boop boop be doop, boop boop be doop." Buddy tried to misrepresent the awareness of the remark with a small fidgety tune. "Even the Smalls family is here with their whacktivism," she continued with her roasting. "Yeah," an adult with her chuckled out his agreement. "Green is the new black after all." This time, Milian too felt something was going on behind her back. "Care for a selfie using the 360-degree panorama stitching software I have?" Buddy asked her. He had to ensure she got distracted from getting a proper whiff of the buffoonery going on. "Oh yeah," she exclaimed. "That software would be eclantastic for capturing the view of the entire valley. It would make a sick selfie background." Buddy let out a sigh of relief. Had Milian started engaging with them, it would have been impossible for him to reboot her good mood. Just like Buddy, she absolutely hated bullying too, but didn't know how to not get involved like him. When she was younger, she ignored it, but now she just couldn't. She even tried mole stoning, where you join in a joke on you to make it not funny anymore, but she didn't have the patience for it. After the selfie, Millie-Anne returned to watching the protest, while Buddy tried to look busy, examining the holographic projection of the Jeffrey pine that once grew on top of the dome. It was very unusual that a tree could survive on top, since not even a blade of grass grew there. What really intrigued Buddy was the tree's holographic image that showed its jigsaw puzzle-like bark. It was as if he could sense the presence of some hidden secrets in the trees that would surface if he could put the jigsaw puzzle together. His line of thought was interrupted when a strong gust of wind almost knocked him off balance. Joseph, Gia, and Millie-Anne had already taken a knee. The tiny succulents were at a disadvantage, with their disproportionately big heads making their noodle-like roots tremble under the airstream's sweeping surge. After recovering his balance, Buddy was quick to determine whether anyone was looking. To his horror, everyone had seen it. That's exactly what leading a privileged life does to you. The barbarian schoolgirl drew her inference about the reason behind the Smalls family's delicate roots. Wish she had the big red switch on her for shutting her off, Buddy thought of her. They were so critical of the Smalls family because they were jealous of them receiving so much care from a human couple of Rosa and Victor Alsett. Being the chief botanical researcher / park ranger of the Yosemite National Park, Ranger Rosa took her job pretty seriously. She and her team would spend days collecting data from various parts of the park and spend even more time in order to analyze it. Despite having the whole national park to take care of, she never gave up on her green fingers and diligently maintained a personal garden. The Smalls family was one of the few extremely privileged ones who were part of that garden. They had been gifted to Rosa by Victor during the time they were just seeing each other. Initially, there was only the married couple of Gia and Joseph in the pot, but then Gia chose to germinate a couple of abandoned seeds. Buddy was brought to life first, and later came Millie-Anne. Ranger Rosa took it as a blessing and didn't pull them out. Buddy was a roseum succulent, one whose chunky leaves were arranged like a rose flower. As for Millie-Anne, she was from the lithops tribe of succulents. Rosa couldn't really detect her germination because lithops resembled little pebbles. The plants of the tribe had evolved to resemble rocks so as to avoid being eaten. When Rosa finally discovered Millie-Anne, she let her be because her pebble-like appearance added an exotic new dimension to the Smalls family pot. Moreover, Buddy and Millie-Anne had entangled their roots with Gia and Joseph, making it next to impossible to uproot them without harming the couple. As Millie-Anne went about observing the protesters, she noticed two small trees in the crowd who she thought were acting a bit too aggressively. She could recognize them. Aren't these two the government officials who had come to our school for giving a talk on the environmental efforts of the government? She asked Buddy. Dunno about that, but they do look familiar, he said. What the two trees did after that shocked Buddy and the rest. The two started throwing their shoes at the police and government officials who were waiting for a thing like that to happen. While there was no one else who joined them in the act, there was a huge roar. The act of aggression triggered the authorities off. What followed was a well-rehearsed maneuver of dispersing the crowd with force. Since they had already activated the video recording jammers to prevent anyone from shooting a clip of the official action, They had a free hand for defying the rule book. First up, the police used a temperature gun that made the protesters feel colder than it was. The weather was already pretty cold since it was only mid-February. Next, a unit of riot police personnel pounced on the crowd with batons, and soon everyone was running helter-skelter. It triggered off a stampede. Things got really chaotic and panicky from then on. This was the exact scenario Buddy was avoiding. The smaller plants and shrubs were getting trampled down there. Finally, the protesters had no option but to log out of the protest site, as the folks who didn't support the protest cheered and danced in joy. "Run, eco-minions, run!" hollered the barbarian schoolgirl. Millie-Anne heard that, but only glared at the lampooning girl. She wasn't able to digest the fact that a perfectly peaceful protest had been made to look like a violent one by the instigators planted in the crowd. She also wasn't able to come to terms with the support the government action was getting. It was a case of the economic Stockholm syndrome, where some folks start defending the government and corporate houses who blatantly exploit citizens. Such folks kept falling for the false narrative that the oppressors were there to bring progress and there was only a small price to pay. With the protest finally dismantled, the police started arresting some protesters and booking them for unlawful conduct. No one could have done anything about it since there was no video evidence available for exposing the propaganda. Sensing that Millie-Anne was about to lash out on the barbarian schoolgirl, Gia decided to take her away. "Come, sweetheart, let's go. Some folks are waiting to meet you." With a heavy heart, the Smalls family left the place and arrived at a water hyacinth settlement of the Tuolumne River. The settlement was under a constant threat from the forest department, which considered the plants invasive. Ranger Rosa and the others would regularly remove them from the river, but the die-hardcore water-dwelling Blumens would reclaim the territory just as quickly. The family was there because it was the plants of the settlement who had found Buddy and Millie-Anne as seeds. While Buddy, the seed, had been found inside an acorn floating in the river, the seed that Millie-Anne sprouted from had been rescued out of the river's depths. The Tuolumne River originated from the majestic Mount Lyell that cradled the rapidly melting Lyell Glacier, the last remaining glacier of Yosemite. "Wow, look at them!" marveled the water hyacinths who had fished out Buddy and Millie-Anne. "They're all grown up now." Though Millie-Anne was still discolored about what had happened at the protest site, she eased up after seeing the affection showered upon her. She stayed on with Gia and Joseph as they talked with the water hyacinths and listened to their problems. Buddy decided to take a walk and sit some distance away. As he watched his family work with the needy, he couldn't help thinking how wrong the jealousy thrives were about them. They considered the Smalls a family of fortunate snobs who only talked about environmentalism and the welfare of the underprivileged because it was a fashionable thing to do. Gia and Joseph did make a lot of money, all right, but would never get rich because they kept donating huge sums of money to ensure the well-being of the water hyacinths. On top of that, Gia also funded certain environmental causes she was involved with. Things did look cool and easy, but activism was a tiresome endeavor. Gia would listen to John Coltrane's jazz saxophone whenever she wished to unwind after a hectic day. The dislike the family garnered was also because Joseph ran a successful lotto business. The only thing he had to do in a day was go back and forth on the next day's lottery combinations with Jack Potter, a daffodil plant he had hired as a consultant. Joseph was seen as someone who ran lost wages, someone who corrupted folks into gambling their money away. Moreover, Buddy thought that his family's involvement in environmentalism was only providing more fodder to the gossipers around. The bullying doesn't really end at school. People grow up and merely upgrade it into a more sophisticated form where abstract facts, skewed up figures, and intelligent name-calling were employed. Absolutely hating the way they talked about his family, Buddy wanted to prove them wrong. But there was a problem. He really didn't know how to go about it. All he knew was that it had to be something other than championing a couple of environmental causes. Chapter 3. Off the Blocks. Things gotta move on when Buddy had to team up with Chris Hunsworth, Hansi, and another kid named Bruce Lee for a class project on humans. They had only gotten together because no one else wanted to have them in their group. They too were from the personal garden of Ranger Rosa. Fashionable kids were working on human fashion. The sports freaks were smacking their lips about getting an opportunity to work on their favorite human games, while the meme junkies wanted to present the world of human memes. The three just didn't have the bandwidth for things like these. Hansi was an aspiring radio astronomer. Ranger Rosa kept him so she could study the effects of pollutants on him. The hemp plants showed great potential of getting rid of toxic substances. They could even do away with radioactive waste. Hemp is one of the fastest growing plants and was the first plant to be spun by humans into usable fiber 50,000 years ago. Today, it was seen as a plant for the future that could be used for producing paper, textiles, and even biodegradable plastics. But Hansi was basically someone more interested in what was happening up there rather than down around in the world. He had tried being part of the Crop Circle Society looking for the extraterrestrials. The Society of Bloomans would beam deep space messages by arranging themselves in weird patterns over agricultural fields, believing the aliens would receive the transmissions and relay back a reply. Though he had no problem with the assumption that aliens existed, he just couldn't wrap his head around the mode of transmission the Society had chosen. He would rather have them beam up mathematical formulas instead of those absurd diagrams. Bruce, the other kid who had to team up with Hansi and Buddy, was a bonsai of a Chinese coffee bush. More than 2 billion cups of coffee were savoured around the world every day, but the species was under the threat of extinction, with some projections claiming it would die off by 2050. The sensitive kid was already having a genuine extinction meltdown because of the awareness. Since he didn't know how to deal with this apparent eventuality, the nerdcore bonsai vowed to solve it by studying botany. For passing his spare time, he got it going with a whole lot of procrastinating activities. It was only recently that Bruce had been chucked out of a shrubgy gang. You were required to take roots, preferably inside the ever-shrinking safe zone, kill the other teams, rob their resources, and create passages for yourself and your teammates. Bruce didn't share a great gamistry with the other gamers because he had a habit of going easy on the enemies. It was considered a strategy blunder to have a team member like him parachuting down with you over the drop zone. "What should we do the project on, guys?" Hansi asked the group after school. "It should be something on what the three of us are interested in," suggested Bruce. But the problem is, we all come from different universes. True, agreed Hansi. Buddy wasn't even sure what he was really interested in. Fighting climate change was still only an abstract idea in his head, though he was some sort of a hacking enthusiast with good skills to hold his own in the ecosystem. Having a younger sister who adores you madly always helps. You know what? You guys should work on Project Human, proposed Millian. Find out what's making them lose their marbles. They liked her suggestion but were a little unsure about it. Nobody would be interested in seeing boring anthropology presentations. But Millian was not your average little girl. She was way smarter. She also knew how to manipulate you to suit her purpose, and right now, she really wanted them to work on Project Human. "You're interested in botany, right?" she asked Bruce. "Wouldn't you be interested to know why these apes keep making stuff like Agent Orange and all those ridiculous perfumes made of whale puke? We didn't plan them out to be this way, right?" "Well, yeah," agreed Bruce. "And, Hansi, how's your astral eavesdropping going on with all the radio frequency interference from satellites and cell phones?" That was enough for curing Hansi's indecisivitis. After having her pitches accepted, she moved to Buddy. "Well?" Millian's "well" was actually a verbalized nudge. He had to nod up to her. Last time he backed out, she had pulled the "if only I had a real brother" card and had howled away to glory. He loved her too much to be going through her emotional blackmail. "I mean, just look at them," she went on. If someone was ready to listen, she loved to go on with her human bashing. "They are calling themselves a disease now, and rightly so. But some of them have the audacity to get offended by it. How dare they?" Sensing that Millian would have gone the whole 9 yards otherwise, Buddy asked, "Yeah, but how do we go about the presentation?" "Well, I can handle the science bit," offered Bruce. "I guess you guys can count me in for researching the web," Buddy announced. Hansi was feeling left out. "What'll I do, eh?" "You could do the presenting," suggested Millian. After all, who'd be better than an aspiring radio astronomer at presenting facts and data? She was sweet-talking him into going for the role. "Sounds like a deal." Hansi gave her the nod. The kids were reasonably excited about undertaking the quest, but they really didn't know what they were getting into. They were going for the best-kept secret on the planet, a secret that had taken many lives thus far, a secret that had only started unraveling after the creation of man. Chapter 4. Project Human. Back in the vintage days, things had been very exciting after the first prototypes of humans were produced, but Big Brother Trickster Rabbit was in a different zone altogether. For the first time in his life, he wasn't interested in photosynthesizing. Corn plants need a lot of sunlight to ensure their narrow leaves could make the necessary amount of carbohydrates. Yet here he was, ignoring the prioritization of essentials. It was because of the strange voices he had been hearing of late. The Big Brother had a unique ability, the skill of hearing sounds that average Blumens couldn't. He was capable of hearing electromagnetic vibrations coming from space. He could hear sound frequencies across rocks too. Years of training had taught him one valuable lesson: always be careful about differentiating between reality and oral hallucinations. Hearing those voices was surely not what he'd have categorized as a figment of his imagination. He was uncharacteristically restless too. In all of his time as the head of the Brotherhood, no one had seen him like that. Corn plants were famously calm, but this time he was waiting impatiently for meeting his childhood friend, the president of the bloomin' world. It was the first time in history that the head of the government and the head of the Brotherhood were both Cherokee. Even though they lived in different regions, President Black Fox and easygoing Beanstalk and the Big Brother were best buddies. The bond between the corn and bean tribes was anyway quite legendary. When growing together, corn stalks provided the bean plants with support to vine over, and in turn, the beans fixed the nitrogen in the soil that was beneficial for the corns. The two were meeting in a monastery of Central Africa, a site where the Brotherhood created the first humans. It was at a fertile valley on the south of the Zambezi River. "How is it going, Trickster Rabbit?" asked the president as soon as he saw the Big Brother. "Good enough, foxy guy," he replied grumpily. "You got better hair growth this year," the president complimented on the Big Brother's golden, thread-like fibers growing from the ears of his corns. "Your tendrils don't look too bad either," he returned the compliment to the bean. Without wasting time in exchanging more pleasantries, he asked the president, "Shall we go?" They started towards the monastery double quick. After a stately reception, they reached a pre-human settlement. A group of kids had gathered around an old female. She was cracking open deer bones and handing them to the little ones for the marrow. "The Brotherhood has done a great job, Trickster Rabbit," conveyed the president. "It's really exciting to see them scavenge for bone marrow." "Thanks." The Big Brother was rather unexcited as he paid his gratitude. The president went on. "I'm told that with a meat-rich diet, we'll be able to fast-track their evolution. They'll now have all the energy they'd need for evolving larger brains. Indeed, we're going to have a fine species for the big job. It is their destiny," summed up the Big Brother. "When are you planning to have them colonize Eurasia?" the president asked. "They'll be ready for that in about 500,000 years." The two noticed an adult who was furiously digging up the dirt at the base of a slab-like rock jutting out of the ground. He was trying to create space under the slab after getting shooed away from all the other spots with natural shade. The president chuckled out. "I see a landscaper in some of them." The Big Brother smiled at that. "Oh, trust me, there's an aspiring landscaper in each one of them," he pointed out. They moved past the settlement. Some of the pre-humans were making crude stone tools. The president was impressed by their dexterity. They were making cutting implements with sharp flakes of stones that they had sheared off from larger rocks. It was quite a delicate procedure. "Wow!" exclaimed the president. Giving the pre-humans an opposable thumb was a masterstroke of biomechanics. Yes, it was a game-changer, the Big Brother acknowledged in an aloof manner as he moved ahead. Usually, all President Black Fox needed to do was mention about Project Human, and the Big Brother would start talking about it like an excited child. After all, the creation of the pre-humans was the most gloriously celebrated work of the Brotherhood. The fraternity was a monastic order of bloomins, whose exploits in the past had got the world to call it the guiding light of bloomin' society. Some of them were the first flower-producing plants and trees to take roots after the thriving seed-producing ferns had started going extinct. The die-out happened when Pangaea, the single giant continent on Earth at that time, started breaking apart, causing massive earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. It was only because of the Brotherhood's resilience and resolve that Bloomens could survive the continental drift, while the seed-producing ferns either got buried under the Earth's crust or died out systematically. After the Bloomens truly started flourishing as a plant species, the Brotherhood started work on realizing its creation myth and prophecy. The scriptures talked about Mother Earth and Father Sun wanting the Bloomens to create a species for the job of helping out in the nurturing and protection of the Tree of Life. The monastery at Zambesi was asked to take up the responsibility of creating the various subspecies of early humans. They were to be made by altering the DNA of the great apes. The lush region also had an enormous lake that proved to be an ideal cradle for sustaining them. When the prototypes were ready, the government marveled at their magnificence and Project Human was given an official go-ahead. No one had any doubts about the potential of the subspecies. Gradually enough, the Brotherhood scaled up their production. It was decided that the Bloomin world should never let their creations know that they were prototyped and evolved by them. They had a multitude of ways for doing that. A diet rich in omega-3 fatty acids, specific sound frequencies, smells, and visual patterns that helped forming complex neural networks were employed to achieve the objective. Is something bothering you, Trickster Rabbit? Sensing that something was seriously amiss, the president asked. I was coming to that, acknowledged the big brother. He was still straining to hear those disturbing voices. Let's activate our private chat modes, he suggested, so that no plant or tree around the two would hear what they were going to be talking about. You got it. The president reprogrammed his holographic projection to a privacy setting without questioning his body. I have reasons to believe that a global invasion is being planned, revealed the big brother. Are the locusts at it again? Guessed the president. The big brother shook his head in disagreement. Then who? I don't know, but they call themselves the SFLA. This is their second invasion. Last time around, they had been unsuccessful at establishing a planet-wide regime. The president almost slipped off the cornstalk he was whining over. He wasn't expecting the cause of botheration to be this serious. Would you do something for me, Black Fox? Asked the big brother as he tugged at his golden hair out of being severely irritated with himself. Well, my dear Trickster Rabbit, besides the fact that we've been friends since childhood, no government has ever said no to a request from the Brotherhood, and there is no reason it should happen now. Thanks. I knew I could bank on you. Should I declare a code red? The president asked. I don't think so. Maybe it is just a group of Bloomens playing a hoax. Just stay alert. We will, assured the president. After the visit, the big brother consulted with the disciple he had chosen as his successor. Master, how do you know that someone is planning an invasion of Earth and not some other planet? Asked the disciple. The big brother took a deep breath and abandoned it dispiritedly. I know because those voices were talking about the pre-humans, he answered. The SFLA wants to use them for the invasion. Chapter 5. Foul Play. A million years after Big Brother Trickster Rabbit heard those voices, the pre-humans achieved a brain size of 1,000 cubic centimeters with their special meat-rich diet. While there was a lot of excitement with the results, the Brotherhood went about fine-tuning the prototypes patiently. They had to be very careful about dealing with the development of their delicate minds. One seemingly random occurrence concerning a band of pre-humans changed things forever. something the Brotherhood had only planned to orchestrate much later. That night, a band of pre-humans was huddled in a cave to seek shelter from a passing storm. The rumble of lightning scared them, but they knew they were safe inside. The ones who found space to squat near the mouth of the cave were exposed to the cold, but it was only one half of their problem. They were more scared than the ones squatting deeper inside because predatory animals were also known to take shelter in such caverns. Even though they had their early Stone Age clubs and spears to defend themselves, the weapons were not much of a deterrent to the animals designed to kill. They wished for something that would make the attacking animals not want to come near them. The storm was building up in the usual way, though this time there was a baffling sort of a phenomenon that the early humans were witnessing. A fist-sized glowing ball had floated down from the cloudy sky. It was heading towards the cave. The men raised their clubs to hit it away, but the glowing ball retreated towards a dead tree. As it made contact with the tree, the wood exploded, and one of the burning branches was flung towards the mouth of the cave. In the beginning, the burning log scared them, but soon they grew comfortable. They didn't need any language, sign or verbal, for conveying to each other that the burning piece of wood was nicely providing them warmth. More wood was added to the fire, and they kept doing so through the night. In fact, they didn't let it die down from then on. A controlled fire kept them safe from attacking animals and provided them with a source of warmth and light during the nights. The smoke also kept the annoying insects away. Soon they developed a hearth for it. Huddling around it developed social interactions and later the first languages. The developments eventually led to cooked food too. Next step for the early pyrobrainiacs was to create fire at will. The Brotherhood had a meeting to exchange views on the new developments, but nothing tangible came out of it. "This is wrong," inferred the big brother of the time at the end of the conference. They were not supposed to have fire until much later. "What difference does it make, Master?" asked a disciple. "We were eventually going to give them the knowledge ourselves." "That's too much knowledge too soon," observed the big brother. "They really won't know how to use it in a judicious and mature manner." Something was wrong, but the big brother couldn't figure what. All that acquisition of the knowledge on fire couldn't just have happened accidentally. It had literally fallen into the laps of early humans. "Somebody has given it to them," suspected the big brother, but he didn't have any leads on who did it. This little fiasco was soon sidelined because the Brotherhood wanted to understand and deal with new retroviruses and herpes viruses infecting the humans all the time. Some showed peculiar symptoms, while the others apparently had no effect. It was also the time early humans started producing advanced stone tools and weapons. The Brotherhood was keeping a close eye because such skills had potential of misuse if left unmonitored. The plan was to eventually evolve 3 subspecies just to be on the safe side, lest something went wrong with any of them. They were expected to branch out into Neanderthals, Denisovans, and Homo sapiens. Ultimately, the Brotherhood got the first batches of settlers to leave Africa. It was done by opening vegetated corridors for them to travel through. After crossing land bridges into Eurasia, one batch moved west into Europe and became the Neanderthals, while the other moved east into Asia and branched out to become Denisovans. The population that remained in Central Africa evolved into Homo sapiens. When it came to comparing the 3 early human subspecies, the Homo sapiens weren't the brightest crayons in the box. As the Brotherhood had expected, the Neanderthals started acquiring a better knowledge of tool making, had way superior stoneware, and were making sleuth of new developments. While the noisy groups of Homo sapiens were mostly into creative arts and adornment, the Neanderthals were more reflective. The Denisovans were very private, a trait that allowed the Brotherhood to keep them wrapped in cotton wool. By 50,000 years ago, the Homo sapiens caught up with the technology bit and finished colonizing Eurasia, Americas, and Australia. They had a few interactions with the other two subspecies along the way, few fights, exchange of concepts, and attempts of interbreeding too. Since there was always going to be the scope of finding an uninhabited region, lasting confrontations were practically unnecessary. Soon, the Homo sapiens were outperforming the Neanderthals by taking greater risks. It was as if something had gotten activated in them. Everything was stable until a new species of pathogenic bacteria, Listeria monocytogenes, infected the Neanderthal population 30,000 years ago. It was a batch of raw eggs that were carrying the bacteria. Soon they were passing on the infection to the Denisovans. The Brotherhood tried to flatten the curve, hoping some sort of herd immunity kicks in, but that was not to be. Those who survived developed a bacteria-brimming pouch at the beginning of the large intestine. The two branches of early humans eventually went extinct in a couple of thousand years. The fluctuation in the Ice Age didn't help either. Though the Brotherhood just about managed to save the Homo sapiens by administering them an antibacterial fungi, one thing was quite strange to them. For some reason, the Homo sapiens weren't affected with the bacteria as severely as the Neanderthals and Denisovans. The best two subspecies were gone. Now the Brotherhood only had one of them left to groom for the big job. It was the Brotherhood's fall from grace. The entire fraternity was utterly gutted and felt defeated, except for one of them, Master Nakatomi of the Wolfia tribe, the big brother at that time. They were the tiniest flower-producing plants in the world that resembled specks of cornmeal floating on the water. He was determined to investigate. There is something in the Homo sapiens' past that has given them better immunity against the bacteria as compared to the other two subspecies, he muttered to others in the fraternity. They had no idea. If only I could get one clue, he kept thinking. The clue was found in the Brotherhood's long-forgotten creation myth and prophecy. He asked the Brotherhood's Research and Analysis Wing to scrutinize the extinction event. After going through their findings, he became even more determined to find out about the invasion of Earth Big Brother Trickster Rabbit was warning of. Master Nakatomi ordered giant water lilies and fig trees to scan up the world, including deep space. In a few years, he received a report with the findings. It was a shocker. "What does it say, Master?" asked one of the disciples. "They want to snuff out the Tree of Life." Master Nakatomi yawped. The Brotherhood had been caught unaware and grossly underprepared. In the coming days, the fraternity sprang into action. They had identified who the SFLA was, and a proper line of action was chalked out. Master Nakatomi was a mastermind when it came to establishing future events through his precise understanding and calculation of logical progression. He could see that the SFLA was going to barter something precious with the humans to make them prepare the grounds for the invasion. Though the Brotherhood was going to try diffusing the threat, Master Nakatomi had a feeling they'd only be able to limit the damage. at least till the 21st century, gave them a real chance of finishing the SFLA with the sacred weapon of the Tree of Life, their Plan C. He also knew by then that the SFLA leadership was thoroughly visionary, and he too would have to match up and ensure he calculates right. Timing was going to be important. However, his plan was extremely delicate because of the possible variables time could dish out. We have made a grave mistake by ignoring the prophecy, one we cannot afford to repeat, pressed Master Nakatomi. He instructed his followers furthermore. Place the sacred weapon at the now forming Yosemite Valley of the Americas. Hope the Brotherhood of the future can use it with precision. Shouldn't we inform the government of our findings, Master? Asked a disciple. I have already tried, but they didn't believe me. I knew they wouldn't have. Not after the Neanderthal and Denisovan extinctions. Moreover, we don't have any decisive proof of the invasion. At least not one we can comprehensively convince the government with. We are the only hope. We shouldn't act in haste. Yes, Master. We just can't afford to go wrong with our timing. This sacred weapon is the last one we are left with.